Alright, let's give it a shot, eh? So, the reason why I find myself infinitely wrong again and again, no matter what I use to try to talk to you about, is because fundamentally of the material, funny word to choose, substance of which we choose to have these discussions about. How is it that I am to explain inevitability with finiteness? How am I meant to explain something that doesn't end with words that stop and start, with concepts that are limited and human understanding as fragmented as it is? But we'll give it a shot anyway. This, as I'm sure you've seen a million times before, is a railway line. You know perfectly well what a railway line is. You've seen them plenty of times before. Anyone who's ventured into any idea of understanding what perception is and understanding how and why they see the world that it is, or just has been curious in optical illusions, has seen or asked the question as to why railway lines always meet on the horizon. And then you hear really intelligent and very accurate descriptions as to the reasons why. As distance moves away from you, things get smaller. Because of distance, right? Exactly. So, with that same mindset, then we can understand that no matter how much you understand that these two never meet each other, never touch each other, every single time you look at them on the horizon, they will always touch each other. No matter the fact that they actually never do. Why is that? No, because of distance, yes, that's right. It gets further away, it gets smaller, right? Yes, of course. That's exactly what it is. Except, distance doesn't exist either. Nor does space. Time. Time, like space, is a construct of our mind and our experience. It is a product of what we group together as an assimilated or aggregate of our experiences and our senses. My brain predicts that, in 5 minutes from now, about 5 minutes will have passed. And so it is happily reconstructing every part and parcel of that 5-minute piece during here and how I'm talking to you about this. But there's a problem with all of this, because what we're actually detecting and what we're sensing with our senses, what we see and experience with our senses and our mind is exactly the same as our senses. I'll get to that in a moment. Is a problem, because that's what we're sensing. And that's fundamentally the reason why the railway lines will always lie to us, is because what we're sensing is an interpretation of information. And as it turns out, distance requires more and more information to fit into a smaller and smaller space. And as such, some of it gets cut out for the convenience of explanation to the human mind when it's trying to interpret what the information is coming back to it within the photonic ranges of what we call light, right? It's pretty obvious, yeah. Everybody's on cool with that, right? So the electromagnetic spectrum is a fascinating thing. And we've all heard all sorts of things about it, except we've all heard the pop culture, fancy woo-wah referencing that actually takes it completely out of context just as much as the regular scientific method does. Let me place it a little bit more within a frame of reference for you. This is a representation of the light spectrum. Up here is the top end, and down here is the bottom end. This is where we have our perception, white light. The single bar of white light, or when fractured, breaking up into what we experience as the rainbow. Then we have the rainbow extend out from that in blue or purple or violet and red. So as red gets darker into browns and blacks, it actually extends down further into the slower ranges of the electromagnetic spectrum. Down here in this part here, this is the infrared. Then you have the ultraviolet. So on either side, you have faster, violet, slower, red. If we keep going slower, you have microwave, and then radio. Keep going faster. From violet, we've got X-ray and then gamma ray. Gamma ray isn't the end. It keeps going. Okay? Without talking about that, because that's far out of our experience, let's talk further down here. Does it stop there? No. It keeps going. Let's have a look. When we open it up a little bit more, we can say that this is the end of the last scale, right? Or we'll say that, let's keep it in line with the markers. That wasn't intended for these numbers to line up, but they do, so let's work with that. So you have 0 hertz, okay? On the light spectrum, these are hertz here. These are very big hertz numbers. These ones down this part that we're talking about are much smaller. In fact, this is where you might say is the middle point, 0. It still keeps going below this into the negatives, -1, -10, -100, -1000, -10 to the 56, all right? But here, it keeps going up into what we call then from, here on out, is what we call the radio waves, and then that extends out into the microwave and keeps going on out. This part here is where we need to focus on today, because between 0, just below 0 as well, but for the conversation we're going from 0 up until about 100, 70 by the conservative estimates. 70, this we'll say is, if that's 20,000, we'll say that this is, I don't know, it's not to scale. This is really not working for scale. But what I'm talking about is the human mind. If you put an EEG machine on your mind and you register what you're reading through the scientific equipment we have available, it'll give you out a hertz reading. All of this is being measured through what we call a hertz reading. This measures the wavelength and the properties of the frequency associated with the phenomenon, which is what we all think of as a little wave like this. It isn't, in fact, a little wave like this. That's a representation of it. It is a far more complex diagram of that. But the hardest part is trying to describe the truth of all of this, because all that we have to work with is what we work with as we know of as words and concepts and understandings. So I can talk to you about these numbers, and these numbers are incorrect. But the concepts and the understanding that I'm relaying here are absolutely accurate and founded. And they are that between, again, below further than 0, but for the sake of the diagram, from 0 up until about 100, you have your thought range. Your thoughts are 0 to 100. Inside of your head is 0 to, again, for the sake of conversation, from -50 to 100, okay, in its extended ranges. Yes, those ones that really aren't being detected at the moment, we know that there's further bounds of that, and they're probably gone much further than that, as I'm about to point out. And then you put on an MEG machine, magnetic encephalogram, which measures your thought waves outside of your mind, and you're still detecting them in the ranges of -50 to 100. And then you measure what we're sitting in right now, and I'm sitting in a frequency range known as the Schumann resonance. And that exists quite comfortably at an average of 7.83, which is usually considered the average for the mind as well. It goes right up until, we'll say, anywhere between 70 and 150. It's because we have some pretty big tools to detect that one. The same frequency bands are detecting completely different things. What it's detecting is phenomenon that exist at that level. Phenomenon that exist at that level. The readings that come out of that phenomenon that exist at that level depend upon the shape and form of that thing that is expressing it. If it is me, it comes out as me. If it is you, it is you. If it is this tent, it is this tent. If it is bacteria and viral material, it is actually somewhere further up the scale in a smaller frequency bandwidth, because these are smaller in scale. If you were to look at your cells, you could detect the frequencies there, and they're just smaller, so they're at lower frequencies or higher frequencies. Smaller in scale, higher in frequency. And that's the case, as it turns out. When you get right up until the gamma and everything else like that, the X-ray, you're talking absolute micro scales of reality. like quantum mechanics kind of stuff. I can't remember off the top of my head, 10 to the 50, could be 56, the number that I pulled earlier. Can't remember. But what I'm pointing out here in this explanation is that there is no difference between the thoughts in your head and the things that you detect outside of your body. You think that your sight is different from your sound, which is different from your touch. Some of you are aware of this nowadays, and you know that they're all different experiences of you. You might think of them as very holistic like that. But what we're talking about here is a representation of understanding reality. Let me say that again slower. A representation of what is reality. Something that has been taken, digested, understood, regurgitated, reconstructed, and then played out. This doesn't mean any of this isn't experienced and felt as the very real thing that it is. It is exactly the reason why it is felt like that. It is exactly the reason why there is no such thing as movement through what we falsely think of as Cartesian space, X, Y, and Z geometries. But space is an understanding of the human mind. In the measurements of further below quantum mechanics, you get into timescales that rival that of the speed of light and even potentially faster than that, which indicates that you're expanding beyond concepts of distance and time and space as to what we know. The speed of light isn't just the fastest, like a really, really fast speed. It is the edge of experience. Beyond that, there is nothing as to what we could call experience. It's like trying to explain a black hole. That doesn't mean that you're dead. But, I mean, considering the understanding of what we're talking about, your body is probably not going to be very happy or present. That doesn't mean that you're dead. Like, gone. Like, from an atheistic perspective. It doesn't mean that you're continuing on into heaven with God and Jesus from a Christian perspective either. Because all of these are understanding concepts that are built and regurgitated from regurgitated information. In order to understand reality, in order to understand your experience, in order to understand how to read contexts of religious doctrines, of esoteric materials, of occult lineages, you need to understand how to work with the deepest of the feminine, as they call it. Most call it today in the esoteric world. The void, the darkness, the nothing, the Tao, no thing. But that's the issue. And that's why the no thing is the most amazing complex of words to try to convey the understanding. But it is completely wrong. No thing is, in fact, a really bad way to describe it. Because there's no way to describe it. There is no way to mind any of it. There is no way to sense or understand any of it. Quite often when you're doing out-of-body experience work, unless you've constructed an understanding and a vehicle to experience it like you experience everyday life, it is void of your understanding, because it takes place in a place that we understand to be common word is ineffable, not able to be conveyed into understanding and relayed to somebody else. Which is kind of like why God is analogized with love, because it's our deepest personal experiences of exactly the ineffable. In the most deepest sense of your experienced contact with the biggest, most embodied form of love. Go ahead and explain it in words, and watch as every single person that does fails inevitably and ends up going, you know what I mean. Because we all do. We all exist beyond this realm of what we call physical reality. But that's a complete misnomer, because this is not physical, as in separate material 3D geometry space with parts and pieces moving through it. That's not how this... Oh, look, I'm moving through... Yeah, I know I just said that, and it looks like I'm moving through it. That's because I understand what they're talking about. Maybe you're missing that part. You're not separate from me. We're in the same place at the same time. It's called simultaneity. Okay? Simultaneity can only happen if there's no such thing as time and space. But then when fractured apart, broken down into a spectrum to be experienced by a invention of the world, you have to leave parts of it out, because otherwise there's no way you can play this game that we call life. There's no way that you can understand it, because the truth is, you're absolutely everything. You're so fucking amazing that you really are so fucking amazing that if you knew how truly amazing you were, you'd be gone instantly, raptured, as they would say in the Christian religion. Because it would be the one attainment instantly, the rainbow body in Tibet. You would instantly become one with all of reality. All of your complete contradictions would fall apart. All of your pushing and pulling, your yins and your yangs, your ups and your downs, your senses lie to you. They're not your enablers, they're your limiters. That does enable you to have an experience. And it's your right to think that you have free will within that experience, claiming that there's no such thing as the law of cause and effect. However, you will accumulate the energetic impressions of your actions, because out there is no different from in here, because what you're experiencing out there is in fact actually in here. Understanding and awareness comes about because of light. What is light? Truth. Truth also requires something that is false for it to be contrasted against, and so all light is not the absolute. The absolute is what we call God, which is not some fancy place in heaven. It is not some man sitting in the clouds. It is not some guru in front of a legend of other gurus of some religion, other religion. It is not anything. It is something that has no... Look, there's many definitions for many different words. One of the definitions for God is something that is beyond all measure, beyond all understanding, beyond all concept of reality and realities, beyond all concept of understanding. And this is why he can never fail or fall to any army, because as soon as there is an army, it is not God, it is God's creation. Not because God went, I'm going to make something fucking evil, but because there's a separation for God to perceive one side for the other. They're both exactly parts of him, and they both return to the same place, or all of creation. Every single person around the world who believes they understand the truth makes exactly the same folly. And it's something I do the best that I can to understand every single time that I remind myself of this concept. That everything that I know and everything that I can conceive of and understand and experience is a good-willed interpretation at best. I don't know what I'm talking about. I can only communicate what I have experienced in the best way that I can. And that is that I have no way to rely on anything that I've ever experienced, be that any form of religion, I'm quite experienced, be that any form of science, I'm quite diverse, be that any form of employment, I've had many, be that any form of culture, I've experienced quite a few. It doesn't matter where you come from or where you are or what you do or where you understand it from. God is understood to be the two most primary and I'm sticking with that because it's just a Western mindset and a Western concept of understanding. I'm Australian, surprise, in case you didn't catch on, which means that I come from what we call a Christian Western society. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm using these analogies. God is literally the universe of all concept. Not the universe of this spiral arm galaxy and then there's another universe over there like another God. Like God is in the universe of universes of universe of universes, like the biggest, most, the two words they use in the Bible, omnipresent, everywhere, at all times, simultaneously, omnipowerful, able to do and be more than anything at any one point, power, or lack thereof in all scales and measures, so much so it is exactly the source of it all. The creator aspect, right? The source of it all. So it's not just these things, it is the source of these things in all scales. But when the scales are spread out like that, then God can have perspective. Thus creation is formed in 7 days, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, wait, wrong one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the middle. Colored spectrum right there. Number 7, the one we live in, right? Or the middle, the heart zone, the Goldilocks. And that's the reason why I left it in the middle there, because it's all the ways around us. We can see up there exactly the same as we can see down there. I'm not talking about into the earth, I'm talking about the scale. Okay? That's what frequency is, a scale. This is not further away from you. This is your brain saying, oh, that it's further away from you. Your brain is telling you that. No matter how much you understand the biology of your eyes, no matter how much you understand how your thoughts work, you can't change the fact that your brain will continue to lie to you. Now, this is just one example. Try and find every example, remembering that it's not railway lines we're talking about, it's perspective, remembering that every time you see something at a different angle, at a different distance, at a different height, it is completely different. Not because it's further away, that's what we understand it to be in common English, but because it is less information for you due to the relevancy of scale to your present field. And this is where psychic abilities and things like that come into it. This is just a renegotiation of material within your environment. Well, these are the ones that are most relevant to me, so these are the ones that I bring in contact and focus. There are plenty of original peoples around the planet who have far further sight than we do, who can hear further than we do. Plenty of animals that can hear further than we do. We have the range that is relevant to us because we live in noisy cities and noisy environments. We need little sounds because we live in tiny homes. We're adjusted to our environments. That is that our common brain patterns circulate around a regular field of experience. This is what my house looks like next tomorrow morning. My brain is constructed an understanding and a projection of what tomorrow should be like if I wake up and get out of bed. Hence why when you wake up in a different location, you go, what the? Your expectation plays a part in how your brain is perceiving and giving you the information. If you expect to see things that other people consider to be impossible, like an aura, you can actually see that because you're bringing that to the relevant information field. As in, like the front. Relevancy. You're bringing into view what it is. Subconsciousness is just literally the other parts of the spectrum that we can't see. Infinity. In the deepest parts of you, you are everything. Or more correctly, you're everything, and you're experiencing this tiny, tiny projection of yourself right here in the middle back of your mind. That's your reality inside here. You experience it out here because it's projected out. We know this. Remember your senses. Remember you. Remember the truth of who you are. That you're not infallible. That you have built-in miscalculations about how you understand reality. Which means that you have to understand how to read contextual relevancy like that. Bibles, laws, dictations, expectations, social norms, different dynamics, all of these things need to be understood with the framework of understanding that we're not separate individual entities walking through Cartesian space of foreign lands in some sort of physical reality. This is not accurate. But only you can reflect on the truth of you. I can't tell you exactly what that is, and that's exactly what I implore you to do, is to practice self-awareness. See your limitations so you can see beyond them. Be aware of where you end so you can explore further than that. What I'm telling you is good things. Take it, use it, and run with it. And always have fun. Till next time.